This is not another eComm podcast. I'm Ian Kaneshiro. Today's guest is a veteran in the tech and e-commerce space who has spent years tackling the challenges of navigating marketing complexities. As businesses grow, the marketing maze becomes denser, and the question ends up looming. How do you keep the pace, make your mark, and continue to captivate audiences? It's a common puzzle for growing organizations where any pause can mean that you're essentially playing catch-up. This is where leaders like Tamar Yaniv come in. Tamar is a founder of Fractionally, whose goal is to help growing businesses and startups speak to their customer base by acting as a CMO to align and execute marketing strategies in order to allow founders and their teams to focus on the things that they're good at, building good products and good businesses. And so today we're going to kind of pick Tamar's brain a little bit and understand a little bit more about how we can wrap our head around marketing strategies and how we can execute moving forward. So Tamar, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Is there anything else about your background that you would like to kind of share with us for our audience?
Well, I think it's important to note that most of my background is in the software world, across different verticals. I worked for an AI real estate platform for investing in multifamily. I worked for customer service experience software, fashion, healthcare. So all kinds of different verticals until I landed in the e-commerce tech space. And my first foray was at Boosted Commerce, which has a really great portfolio across different health, wellness, beauty brands that they were acquiring during the huge aggregator craze. And they're still operating and doing really well. And I am now working for myself for a few different software companies addressing the same clientele.
Yeah, and actually Boosted is where you and I met back,
Yes.
right after the whole COVID thing, when we're getting back into, the events and actually seeing people in real life. And, one of the things that, I know we spoke about in the past is, and during that time was brands and why brands are important. And, specifically in the Amazon seller space, there is this idea of, in order to get into private label, I simply need to go find a product and put it on Amazon. But, it's so much more than that. And when I'm doing that process, why is the brand that I'm growing important? What is the need for that kind of activity?
So first of all, I have so much respect for the people that did that, because finding product market fit in this reality of this digital shelf in this marketplace where we can move so quickly, that's what they did. They were just like, hey, this is my intuition. Maybe they did some kind of research, but they found something that fit and that worked. The problem is that if you want more than a listing, a successful listing, if you want to build a moat around your business, and if you want to expand into other channels, you have to do the brand work. You have to really figure out why you're different, what matters, what you do that your competitors don't do as well, that your customers care about. And that's really the secret sauce, and building out that persona behind it, your brand as an individual, and how do you go through that process?
And I hear you on that. And I think that it's almost easier said than done, right?
Oh, it is. That was much easier than a branding process, what I just did. Less expensive also.
Totally.
There you go.
Yeah, well, I think everyone can sign off here and we'll go and just start opening up new brands. I think the question I have from someone who has never, built a brand, especially from a product side, is what is my first step? How do I start from zero in getting people to notice me? Is it the brand? Is it the problem? Is a brand a logo? Is it a name? I don't even know where to start.
First of all, you start with the market and what's already happening. Don't be taken by surprise by whoever is already there, what they're doing that works. And there you have to really fill your picture with as many pixels as you can to do your market research and understand what is already happening. And from there, you start to find the vacuum as you zoom in closer that your brand can fill. Or even to do better, there might be someone that's kind of doing where you see the opportunity may be, but you think there's a way to make it more relevant for the customers that you want to address. So you really have to zoom into what's already happening, who's doing it well, who isn't showing up, and where that opportunity is. Follow market trends. Even just spending time on TikTok, which I know goes against everything that's right for your soul or your wellness, just to understand what people, and TikTok isn't just Gen Z. Like, if you want to know about middle-aged moms, you should also go on TikTok. If you want to know about dudes that are into like a fitness craze, you should also go into TikTok. If you want to know about guys that are making a living as influencers, pulling cars off the side of the highway as rescue mission, you're going to find them on TikTok. You can do incredible market research to understand what matters, what's resonating. And a lot of these influencers already have the audience that you want to borrow, address, whatever that might be. So you can also find incredible opportunities there if you have that mindset as well.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that what this kind of reminds me of is that oftentimes you need to, when you're trying to address a problem and you see that there is a problem that you can solve, it's kind of about finding your niche or your niche or whatever way you say it these days, right? But because you actually know the CEO of SellerSnap, Ellie, right? We've met him a few times. And I remember in the early days of SellerSnap, I sat down from Ellie across the table during lunch. And I was trying to learn a little bit more about, our space in particular, in terms of where, as an Amazon repricer, that knowing that there was a bunch of competitors out there already that already had large customer bases, and our customers knew who they were and the customers we wanted didn't necessarily know who we were. And so I asked them, I was like, what was the idea about starting something that someone's already done? Because when you're thinking about starting a new brand or a new product or a new service, oftentimes you remember like the companies that are kind of first to market. There's a bunch of rideshare companies out there, but everybody knows Uber. Uber is the verb, even though you're using Lyft or somebody else, right? And so one of probably the most inspiring things that Ellie ever said to me was that you don't necessarily need to be first to market. You just need to carve out your slice of the pie. You focus on a specific area, a specific problem, and that is the customer base that will support your business. And then you can worry about how you grow the pie, but kicking it off, it's about solving the problems that the companies that are already there aren't necessarily solving, or reaching the customers that haven't been reached yet because they don't necessarily create that market fit, as we were talking about.
Being first to market is painful, expensive, and exhausting. The amount of education that you have to invest in, it's like, who's searching for this thing that you just came up with that nobody knows exists? Just practically, how do you get that attention? How do you make people discover you when they're not looking for you? They don't know everyone's riding in a horse buggy, and you're trying to sell them a car. How do you get their attention and make them understand what you're trying to get them to do? And you can see it. Let's look at a great example. Trello, Asana, all these really fantastic project management platforms that have been around for much longer than Monday.com. And Monday.com is killing it. Absolutely. They benefited from all of the spending, the mistakes, the pain points of everyone that went before them. So yeah, you should absolutely not be afraid to do something that's already happening. You should not actually waste time reinventing the wheel if the wheel isn't needed for success, but rather find that unique positioning, that unique way that you will stand out in the crowd. It's actually better, I think, to not be first to market.
Yeah. If you ask Ian fresh out of college, like, I would have probably argued the other way, because you don't know anything at that point. But I think, from a product development or the service development standpoint, there's this idea of also, keeping an eye on your competitors, but you also have to kind of ignore what they're doing as well at the same time. And so it's like this balance of solving problems, but also trying to get noticed. You brought up the example of Monday, and I think that's a really interesting use case there, because like, what did Monday do well? Because again, like you said, they're just a project management software, and they do the same job as Trello and Asana, and also they have a new competitor on the block, ClickUp, and they're also trying to get into CRM space with like HubSpot and Zoho but what are they doing differently from the marketing standpoint that is getting them noticed? Like, why are we talking about them and not one of the other, 10 companies we just rattled off?
So I might be missing the mark here because I haven't done an intensive case study on Monday and what they did, but I can say from my experience as a user and from just, using project management software my entire career, they created a brand that felt like it was a little bit more accessible and easy to use, even with the colors, a little bit more user-friendly for everybody. This is a platform for everyone. Asana, if I'm not mistaken, was built by founders who I think came from Google. I might be wrong, either Google or Apple, one of the top big four that were just like geniuses at the product side, on the product side, and created this great infrastructure. I love Asana. But Monday created something that felt a little bit more accessible, a little less elite or necessarily sophisticated. I don't want to say it in like a derogatory way, but something that, your admin at your company would also feel comfortable using, and it wouldn't be just for the product side or people that are a little bit more technical. Is that true to how the product is built? I don't think so. Not necessarily. I think it's really with the brand story. I've seen Monday also, commercially on billboards in LA, right? Or like coming out of the Holland Tunnel, you see, or like you see a giant billboard for Monday. So obviously they've created a mass market appeal as well.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if you remember this or if I'm remembering this correctly, they did do a rebrand. They were DePulse for a few years, and then they rebranded to Monday, and someone decided that they're going to spend probably $1 trillion on Monday.com, which is probably an SEO, like a search engine optimization.
Oh, yeah.
Absolute nightmare. But, I think that it really ends up paying off for them in the long term. And I think what you said was interesting was that, they made their brand, kind of feel approachable, like you said. And my question is, kind of steering this back to like especially the Amazon seller spaces, how can somebody that is doing something that is maybe even a commodity at this point, selling something on Amazon, how do you make that brand approachable, and how do you make people see it and want to choose yours over the other 1,000 options that they have on the marketplace?
Well, first of all, you might not want to make your brand approachable. You might want your brand to be elitist and luxury and very expensive and target a certain audience. So that's the point they have to bring up as well. But I think you've got to do the research. Like when I start a branding project, the first step that cannot be skipped is we are going to look at every single digital touch point of your brand, of your competition. If you are off Amazon already, any other, all of your analytics, customer journey, if you have already a list of existing customers, we're going to do surveys, we're going to do interviews, and you will be surprised what you will discover. I've dealt with brands before that were sure that their audience were like middle America dudes driving pickup trucks. It was a pet brand. Like that's what they thought they were selling into. This is our ideal customer, and I'm positive. I have a few reviews that let me know this. When we started doing customer surveys, what became very apparent is the biggest persona that was purchasing their product were women in their like 40s to 60s. You'd already done NPD. That was like camouflage.
How are we so wrong about that, in that process?
I think not doing the work. Like they did enough work to get some information and just, it's like kill your darlings in a way. When you're doing marketing, when you're doing branding, you have an idea of something, and sometimes it takes really hardcore work to really prove what's true. And especially, and let's be fair, on Amazon, it's really hard. You do not have the same data that you have off of Amazon. So being fair to them, it's really hard on Amazon to get that data. And you have to they had enough assets off of Amazon for us to dig into and to do the research and to find out what was going on. But that really opened up new opportunities, definitely a very different brand direction. And speaking of pricing is also really important when thinking about your brand, how you're telling your story with price, because that is also a way that you speak to your customer about who you are, what you are, and where you are in the market. And pulling all those things together so that when your consumer engages with you, they understand. And having a differentiated brand on Amazon might not always move the needle if you're selling staplers, But people will certainly notice when you've invested that there is a level of confidence and trust that they garner in the same, maybe not to the same degree as like a strong review moat. This is still, you still need these basic principles on Amazon to succeed, but there's a level of trust that you gain when you've invested on the branding side.
Totally. This company that you're talking about where you're thinking like middle America, dudes and pickup trucks, like that's the audience. If you didn't tell me it was a pet brand, I would have thought you were talking about Stanley, because this is
spot. Oh yeah. Oh, that's
spot on, right? It's the same thing. Like whoever, like somebody at Stanley, they probably left by now, it's patting themselves on the back because the company that is a really legacy company, they've been around forever, really catering to middle America, dudes and pickup trucks, construction workers, making sure that people had hot, soup and coffee on the job site, day in and day out. They really built their brand on the back of that kind of consumer. And, they also worked into kind of the outdoor space. So, people would take it camping and hiking and things like that. And then whatever they did in the past, whatever it is, couple of years to really tap into this market that wanted the product that they already have. Like changing a color is such an easy thing to do on a product. They made it 40 ounces through a straw, made it fit in the cup holder of your car, which is the biggest selling point of this product, is that it fits in the cup holder of your car. And they just did an amazing job. And, I'm not sure if I've ever seen an advertisement for Stanley. Not one. And
where I've seen the most, being a mom myself, is on Facebook mom groups. So people be like, has anyone had like the pink Stanley? I heard it's a Target. Like you can go get it. Like people love a good Stanley cup. And it's almost like this middle class badge of honor that I invested in this, and this is what I love, and I'm gonna stay hydrated and on the go while I schlep my kids everywhere. And I'm investing in that because it's important. I don't even know that I'm even able to really analyze exactly how many things they did right there, but absolutely. And I think there are always under addressed markets that tend to hold so many hidden opportunities. Older shoppers, those boomers that we love to shade, they got a lot of money to deploy. Right. They got a lot of time. They like to shop.
And they love TikTok now.
They do. They're on
like
TikTok.
Ready.
They're on Instagram. People are kind of Gen Z obsessed, and there are certain things that Gen Z will drive for you. And if that's your consumer base, that's amazing, and they will drive trends. But you just highlighted the power of the purchasing power of the mother. It's deciding most of the time what goes in and out of the home,
right,
across America. Yeah.
Right. And I think that goes back to one of the things that you mentioned before is about understanding where you're positioning yourself in the market, right? And Stanley, being the size of the company that they are, definitely have an idea of where they want to be in the market. And when oftentimes, at SellerStat, as a B2B software solution, which is not necessarily the same thing, but kind of has some of the same ideals, is that we often try to understand in terms of, gaining new business and connecting with our customers, is it product first or is it marketing first? Like, are we solving a problem and getting people to come to us because of the problem? Or are we showing people the problem and telling them why they need to come to us? And like, do we develop to bring in new customers or do we market harder to bring in new customers? It's kind of the idea. And it just kind of brings us back to this, is like, these decisions have to be really like well thought out, right? And I guess my question is, where I'm going in this ramble is, does it matter where I decide, or does it just matter that I decide?
It depends.
Oh, you got to give me more than that.
No, it depends on where you are. Like, especially, so I've done, helping brands that are on Amazon as well as software. I do both on the branding. Branding is one of my main expertise. For software, it depends on where you are. Do you need to educate people? Are they aware of what your solution does? Having pain point focused marketing is always the best practice. This is what people care about. You can highlight why your tech is way more advanced than your competitor and get into a feature fight if that's where you are. But in general, being focused on the pain point, that's best practice. If you don't have a product that is keeping up then you will be dependent on marketing. And I've been there. We've all been there before, where you're either a little bit behind the competition or you're not delivering on time, whatever it might be. And marketing needs to make up for a multitude of challenges on that side. This is the reality of software. But no matter what you should be addressing, pain point, the question is, do you have the luxury, or do you need to get into these feature fights because you're not differentiated enough?
Interesting. So what it boils down to is really kind of understanding what, I guess, your capabilities are. Because I guess if you're a brand new company right out the gate, you're kind of doing, like an MVP, like your minimum viable product, whether it's a physical product or a service, you got to understand like what your capabilities are, how fast you can scale. Software is a bit different than a physical product, but they both have their hurdles.
Absolutely. But I think we've never been more inundated with content, constant, like nonstop attention economy that you're operating in. So who cares has never mattered more. Why people care has never mattered more. Our attention spans are getting shorter. People are exhausted. They don't want to read all of your detailed, narcissistic, why I'm so great. Get to the point. Who are you? Why do I care? How are you going to improve my life? How do you make me feel? Is this solving my issues? Does the price make sense? Let's move on. So you have to always market for a bored audience. Assume your audience is already bored when they're coming to you. And how do you get past that hurdle?
So we need to entertain our audience. We need to essentially delight our audience in order to build that trust to eventually have them buy from us, right? Is that what I'm understanding?
I don't know if entertain is the right word. I think you need to flag what matters to them and what turns them on.
Interesting.
I don't know a better way to say it. What is sexy to your audience, and how do you engage them in that way? And that's where you're going to really move the needle. And it might be that you're just very direct with them. Right. A lot of people like it when you're very direct. What if you're like, hey, your listing sucks? Like, maybe that's the right way to talk to someone when you're trying to get them to use your listing software. Your listing sucks. Your intuition's off. Let's talk. Maybe that's better than all of the fluff and jargon and everything else.
Totally. And I guess really understanding, the buyer persona on the other end, in the B2B space, business owners, business leaders don't have time to deal with the fluff. And so they might appreciate like your business sucks. But when we're talking about, B2C, direct to consumer, whatever, you have to probably work around that a little bit and just find different ways to reach them. Because like the thing that I constantly think about, and, this is a struggle for anybody trying to, market a product or build a brand is the funnel, right? Like you always hear with the funnel, and you're always trying to feed the funnel, but also there's like different entrances, and you might have multiple touch points, or you often have multiple touch points before you get someone into that pipeline, right? And so trying to understand, like, it's a bit about consistency there, right? And how we grab the attention and say, hey, we're here. And we say, hey, we're here 1,000 times before someone is ready to buy. Because it's a timing thing. It has to be at the right point.
So I'm in this world, I'm not branding. I know B2C. I can do B2C. I can do consumer brands. I can help you create something that's going to resonate, talk about how you're differentiated, creates bring in the right archetypes, everything. When it comes to funnels in B2C, that's a different world for me. And that is but the same principles still exist, and it is consistency. I know in B2B, I think it's something like 75% of the sales cycle happens before they ever give you their contact information. People have already looked at you. They've already looked at your competitors. They've looked at your ads. They checked you out. They downloaded, whatever that might be. Maybe watch your YouTube, whatever it may be. You need to have that infrastructure built, which starts with doing a proper brand, creating a proper brand, creating the personas, understanding the messages, A/B testing constantly. When you have that built, everything you're doing is aligning. It's aligning. So when someone engages with you, it's the same Ian it was yesterday that it was the next day, and you just have more exciting things to talk about, but you're the same brand with the same values, addressing many of the same pain points. And it does matter, that trust that's built of, oh, okay, it's clear. And I think branding in general and marketing is oftentimes more about what you don't say than what you say, letting people fill in the blanks when necessary, not over explaining, not being overly descriptive, being clear and to the point, especially with the use of AI that is just, chat GPTing out everything you see with a lot of marketing stuff. The less that you say, the more edited you are, the more clear that you are, the more you'll resonate, the more you stand out.
Right. That's really interesting because I'm just trying to think of how I might like use something like that in real life, right? If I'm selling a hammer and I say, this hammer can only hammer this one nail in this direction, anyone, even though it might have multiple uses, anyone coming to me might say, I don't have that specific problem. And so you just took yourself out of the running because you were being, almost too structured and you weren't allowing the user to kind of fill in the gaps and go, this tool can solve all these different problems for myself.
Mm-hmm. So I think, again, this is a big differentiation. I think when it comes to something that's more commoditized, like hammer, you're going to be competing with 1,000. Maybe the right thing if you're selling a hammer is you should create a hammer for a woman's hand that's pink or something that helps people with arthritis. This would be a smart move if you're selling hammers. And this is a specific pain point that you talk about that makes you very different. And then you can talk about all of the features that are supporting the specific pain point that you're addressing. When it comes to something that is, let's say you have a supplements brand that is for prenatal support. Okay. This is very specific. And there are certain things that really matter. If you start telling me you do all the things, I don't believe you. Okay. I don't believe you. It's too much information. I need to go through all of this content that is just very, very, very descriptive. And maybe I look at that and I think you're impressive, but in general, you might also decrease trust. It's like when someone explains things to you a little bit too much, and you're like, it smells like a story, right? It's the same thing when someone is engaging with your brand. When you're very clear, you get to the point, you've identified with people, you're not afraid to make a decision of who your target market is, what they care about, and what you deliver. It's scary to do that. I met someone the other day who has a software. He was literally like, I do everything for Amazon sellers. I was like, okay, but what do you do? No, literally, I do everything. I was like, okay, well, we need to talk about let's pick 4 things that you do and let's start building a brand. He's like, yeah, but then I lose business. I'm like, you're losing business right now, a lot. Nobody understands who you are, what you are, why you matter. So I think that with clarity and intelligence, it's a scary thing to do also, but it's necessary.
Yeah, it has to be super difficult to kind of look inwards at yourself and really try to understand who you are, to you as an organization, but also to your customers. Because as you were saying, customers can kind of smell when something's not right and almost they believe that. And I believe this personally as a consumer, as someone who also buys, B2B software. It's, a jack of all trades is actually a master of none. There's just because there's always going to be these things that you're missing when you're trying to do too many things. So that goes back to the original point. Sometimes you really got to find your niche and be super, super honest with yourself about what is the problem I'm trying to solve and who is my customer base. And you keep going, be consistent until you kind of exhaust that. And then you can look beyond, the, those audiences and try to break into new markets.
Absolutely. Well, I think in general, any entrepreneur with worth his or her salt probably suffers from shiny new thing syndrome because it's just how it is. You've had the courage to do something, to move things. It's amazing. It took a lot to get there. You're a risk taker and you become a magnet for identifying new opportunities. And it's really awesome, but you have to be honest with yourself and be willing to say no to things that aren't the right move.
Yeah, I love that. And I definitely suffer from that syndrome.
Shiny things? I like shiny things.
I love shiny things.
Don't like a shiny thing.
Don't get it twisted. As we kind of wrap up, I would love to hear kind of your final thoughts on, if I'm building a brand, whether I'm building a software or a D2C product, something physical, what should I be looking out for as I'm going through this process? What are some of the trends that I should be kind of expecting through 2024 and beyond? And where do I really kind of like kick off this endeavor?
First of all, find the right partner to help you. And as someone who's been on both sides of the table, it's really important. There are lots of different offerings out there. Find the right partner to walk through that process with you that has very clear milestones, deliverables, everything else. And be focused on someone who's very focused on the research and on the data. There is the creativity and the spark needs to be there. You need to have someone that can help you to pull that together and to be unique and creative. But being intelligent with the positioning and clear on that is probably the most important thing. I think logos can always be tweaked. Colors can always be edited and changed. Having clarity with your position, where you are, and real about that is the most important piece, in my opinion. So make sure you have the right people, person, team in place to help you through that. And don't be afraid to be very critical in that process to find the right people to help you out. Trends, I think the trend right now is back to better business in general. The market is challenging on all sides, whether you're selling on Amazon, whether you're in software. Driving value is the most important thing. And it's time to focus on profit, on clarity, on the basics of building better businesses across the board.
Yeah, I love that. And, in a really crowded space, like I love the idea of getting back to basics, doing the things that you know how to do and doing it well will be successful. And to your first point, this is a really common theme that comes up on on Not Another eComm podcast, revolves around, putting the right people in the right positions. If you're kicking off a new product or a new service, oftentimes when you're doing that, you find that people end up being experts in the procurement of the product or the development of the service, but the branding and the marketing comes behind it. No one's expecting you to know everything and to know how to do it. And so finding the right people, whether, you're bringing on a seasoned CMO or you're bringing on someone fractional like yourself, or when you're starting to hire people, you put the right people in the right positions and they believe in what you're doing. That's ultimately the key.
Absolutely. And I would honestly tell people starting off, do some of that infrastructure work, but you just need to get moving and get going. So also don't be afraid just to make decisions. Finding that product and the product market fit is absolutely the most important thing. And branding never ends. Your brand should always be developing and evolving. So pull the trigger, just go for it.
That's great advice, Tamar. So Tamar, I just wanted to thank you again for joining us on Not Another eComm podcast. And to all of our listeners, I hope you pulled something from this conversation about building a brand and some examples and, the things that we can look out for and the areas that we can improve. I know that there's a lot of little tidbits in there and some gold nuggets for myself. So Tamar, again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
All right. And for anyone who's still here, please go ahead and if you haven't done so already, subscribe to Not Another eComm podcast. Throw us a like on the different podcast channels that you might be listening to this on, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks.